I primarily work, as you can see from the pieces that are behind me, on paper. My history of development as an artist started with a love for drawing, which evolved into printmaking. Both activities are paper-oriented, drawing on paper, intaglio, printmaking on paper. And so when I decided to get my master's my MFA in painting following my MA in printmaking, it seemed a natural progression to go to paper versus canvas. It felt safe to me. I made that transition because intaglio printmaking is primarily a black and white activity. Drawing, of course, can be both color or black and white. But with painting, I could explore my love of color. And so after I finished my master's degree in intaglio printmaking, I got my MFA in painting, and the paper went right along with me. So I think later on in this conversation, we'll talk about my process with the paper and the paint. But the pieces that are behind me right now are my most recent works. I'm currently working on another group of paintings that will be seen at Olson Larson in October, which is a gallery in Valley Junction. And they're not looking a thing like these. It's been really fun for me to see what this exhibition has turned out to look like, especially when I'm in the midst of making new artwork, new paintings. For me as an artist, when I finish a batch of works, they go away. Hopefully they go to a gallery, someone buys them, or if they don't, I tend to tear them up and use them in the next batch of paintings. So here I am in a room full of Sarah Grant, and at the same time I'm in my studio in Des Moines working on a new group of paintings. So while you might be learning something about me today, I'll be learning about myself as well, looking at all the works that are here from a lot of different points in my career. These particular pieces, as we walk around the room, you'll see there's more complexity in other works than there are in these. I did these in 2010, the end of 2010, and my objective was to remove the volumes of layers that you'll see in some of the other works, and to address these as my old printmaking self, if you will. So a much more direct, a simple, less layered process went into these pieces. Less layered in terms of paint, but in all three of these works, hiding underneath or tucked in, for example, right here, I took old print proofs that I had not touched or looked at for years and cut them all up and collaged them into these pieces and let those printmaking snippets be as important as the brush strokes and the layering of the paint. I think one of the reasons that I wanted to do this with this batch of paintings, I'm sure some of you watching the video know that I own a company called Sticks, and it's completely separate from my personal paintings. I work with lots and lots of artists that I employ to do handmade in America furniture, and it's highly colorful and much more realistic than my works. And it's work that's as complex as some of the paintings you're going to see later. So I just had this desire to simplify in 2010. And perhaps that's part of my reaction to what's gone on in our culture and in our world right now. It's very stressful for Americans, and for me as well, with the economy, and of course we're at war, and I just felt like, wow, I need to step back, and I don't want to think about the complexities of things. I just want to organize simply. So that's what these three pieces are about. This one is titled First Bath, and I dated it 1953 to 2010 because I thought, well, you can't simplify your life in the moment if you don't at least think about where it started and where you are today, which is probably a pretty complex bag of thoughts. But as I was working on this piece, I was back in my head to being a small child and through my life. And so that's this piece, sort of an homage to a very happy life. I've had a very happy life. I love to write, and I love words, and I love storytelling. So that probably explains where my complex titles come from. They're more like little one-liners out of a long poem. In fact, I had some fun a few years ago. I took the history of all my titles and just wrote them in chronological order, and it sounded like a very, very long journal or a long poem. So it's appropriate to start with First Bath. 1953 was when I was born. This was completed in 2010, and that sort of sets the stage for the fact that these paintings are like small journals of either things that have happened to me or to friends or to my family or things that are happening in the world. So First Bath, just an old printmaker. I think there's no artist, writer, journalist, whatever you are in your life, you could be a nurse or a doctor or whatever, who doesn't at some point say, well, did I take the right path in my life? And so working on this series of paintings, for some reason I was not feeling very secure as a painter, and so I thought, okay, let's go back when you were a printmaker and have that be the impetus of this piece, which then led to this whole series, of which there were probably 15 or 20 paintings. The rest of them are gone. There's a couple over here that we'll look at. But again, just an old printmaker. I took all these old proofs, tore them up, of course, to people like my mother. You're doing what? You're tearing up perfectly wonderful pieces of artwork? Well, they had their moment. They had their moment in time. They didn't go anywhere. They can either be stuck under the bed or I can use them. So this is my homage to me being a printmaker. This piece, I Met Me at the River. This one is entitled 1977 to 2010. I was in graduate school at Iowa, and I was switching from printmaking to painting. And if you know anything about the University of Iowa, the printmaking department is on the west side of the river, and the painting department, at least in 1977, was on the other side of the river. And my choice to leave intaglio printmaking with Mauricio Lisansky was sort of a meeting myself moment, because I think when we're young and we're students, we can be moved in directions that we may not totally be in control of. While I loved printmaking, I just didn't have the patience and for the time that it takes to etch and grave and wait to see the end result. And I knew that about my personality. I'm kind of type A, I move fast, I think fast, I paint fast, and I wasn't finding a groove in printmaking that would accommodate who I am. My more ADD kind of self I wasn't mature enough to figure out how to integrate that into being a printmaker. I did get my master's degree, I did finally complete the program, but I met myself at the river when I said, okay, Sarah, it's okay, you can be a painter. I didn't have a whole lot of background in it. In fact, the only background I'd had were undergraduate courses I had taken in painting, and then just a few painting classes here and there at Iowa. Most of my graduate level work was in art history, which they required every single semester, and drawing every single semester. So I was pretty scared to launch into something I didn't know anything about, and I knew that, back to saying, one undergraduate painting course when I was at Colorado State, the professor said, you know, you really should go back to the drawing department because you just can't paint at all. You're not a good painter at all. And as a young person, comments like that from a professor, they can kind of stick in your head, and it's real hard to shake them, and they cause a lot of insecurities. But I just needed to be happy. So this painting, I Met Me at the River, is that that story, I guess. You'll notice in my work that there are a lot of house shapes. I think that's because I love my house. I love what's in my house. I love the people that are in my house. I loved where I grew up. I love my grandparents' houses and my friends' houses. And in that space, I find safety and security. So other than the fact that I think it's just a great shape to manipulate around, it holds a lot for me. So this painting, 1977 to 2010, is about looking back and being happy that I launched myself as a painter when I was pretty scared about the whole concept. This is a 2003 piece. I can't even read my own dates, but I'm pretty sure this is the same 2003, 4. These two pieces are 2010, and so juxtaposing these with each other, I think you can see the simplicity that I was striving for in this grouping. This one is titled Etching number 2, Never Made Till Now. Etching number 3, Never Made Till Now. There's little bits of etching in these pieces, but had I ever completed my life as a printmaker, this is what I would want those prints to look like. But I did it with paint because it's fast and it's immediate. So these kind of go along with the series that you saw over there. I think what's interesting about comparing these two pieces with the centerpiece, you can see the multi layers of paint that are in these two pieces. I'll show you some works in progress as we go through this interview, but these are final layers, and under these two paintings, there's probably, I don't know, maybe 5 to 10 layers of paint that just keeps going on top, on top, on top, on top. Sometimes I even let my paint dry out to the point where it becomes kind of like putty, and then I smash it into the paintings to get the textural stuff out of this. This one is called Arrangement. This piece is Incidental Remark. Those would be titles that would suggest something outside of myself that was going on. I either heard a comment that upset me, or which is why there's this dead fish shape in there. I didn't like what I heard. I didn't like what I was seeing. I find images and hide them in the piece to explain where I was at that point in time. The arrangement piece, I also have pieces where there's not a whole lot of story. It's just about the fact that I like to manipulate shape and color. I don't know if I could ever explain why I chose abstraction or more conceptual addressing of my artwork than realism. I make a lot of realism in my other part of my art life, which is sticks. But in these pieces, I prefer to make the viewer say to themselves, incidental remark, what is that? Where is that in here? And why is there motion with that? Because, well, if I were to answer that question, I would say that the remark came out and it affected me, and it keeps moving. It doesn't leave your brain, even though it's done. So being conceptual visually with ideas and experiences is what I'm doing here. I don't know if I'd call it abstract. I don't know what genre I fit into. I do know, having graduated from my final degree in 1979 or 80, I can't remember, the world was a different place for art students. It was very, very much based in the classics of, particularly at Iowa, of the American School, which was sort of designed by Robert Henry. There was a lot of emphasis on what had gone on through the ages in art, and a more traditional approach to the standards of being a painter. That was the environment I was trained in. Of course, there were no computers. It was verboten to be using a camera to do your intaglio printmaking and etching from film or any of that sort of thing. In fact, in the 70s at Iowa, it was a fight just to get photo silkscreen into the department. I had one friend who had heard of the computer, and she would hide out in the graphics design department and try to figure out what this machine was. So where I grew up as an artist was flinging paint around and moving paint around and moving ink around and getting dirt under your fingernails. That's another reason I quit printmaking. I can remember walking around the University of Iowa campus and people looking at me, and my fingernails were just black underneath, and I'd be walking like this thinking, oh my gosh, they think I don't wash my hands or manicure my fingernails. So that wasn't the reason I got out, but it did occur to me. So in any case, I grew up at the tail end of a very traditional American way of teaching art school students. I mentioned earlier that the requirement from my freshman year on was every single semester from 1972 to 1980, I took an art history class. Believe me, I didn't like them then. I love art history now, and I love history, and it affects everything that I do here. I read constantly, I read the paper, I read books, I read historical fiction as well as real history. But art history was a requirement for drawing students in particular, as was a drawing class every single semester. That is a very traditional approach to training artists, and I think it's a foundation that got me to a place where I finally felt comfortable that I wasn't going to be a realist. I mean, I don't know what the young people at Central College and elsewhere are thinking, you know, should I draw it like it looks, or can I draw like I think it looks, or can I blow it apart? That's a real hard thing for young people to come to terms with. And I think with my experience at Colorado State University and at Iowa, I was able to mature through having taken a lot of art history and a lot of drawing. While these two pieces are later than this particular piece, this is 1994, the large field expanses of color, this brush stroke and marks upon marks and the little bits of collage that are in here was the way I painted all through the 90s and the beginning of the 2000s. And the reason for that is that I'm very afraid of large fields. I'm afraid that they're going to bore me and they're going to bore the viewer. And so what you see here is what's underneath these large fields of color and texture. And that gives me the security, just knowing this is under this, to be able to try those large fields. I will also say it's interesting to have your work hanging in the gallery and to be able to have a show of your latest works every year or every other year, because you meet the people who know your work and they say, oh, well, what happened to this? Why are you doing this? Or I don't like these fields of color, or why is this so chaotic and this? Well, that's what I did yesterday. This is what I'm trying today. It doesn't mean that this has left me. It's a constant reevaluation of what you know and what feels good and what doesn't feel good, what feels uncomfortable. I'll never forget, I was in my thesis period at Iowa, and my professor, John Dill, came into my studio to see my thesis works. They were all stapled to the wall, which is how I work. I just staple the paper up and turn them and move them. And anyway, he came in and he said, this thing is going nowhere. And he took his pocket knife out, and I thought, what is this about? He says, tell me what your favorite part of this painting is. And I pointed to some shape, and he said, well, if it doesn't bother you, can I cut that out of there? And you can hang that over there, because this little spot is keeping you from finishing this piece. You are honoring that one small spot and not thinking about the larger picture. So in a single second, I recognized that, you know, maybe it's okay to have some of these special things to me in the process of making a painting hiding. It's okay to have them underneath. It's okay to have them go away. It's okay to cut it out and use it another day. And so that really is kind of, in a nutshell, what I do when I paint. I find special places and colors, and some I keep and some I discard, until finally, at the end of a piece, I hit upon, what is this thing about? And that's when I start thinking of the title. That's when I start thinking, well, now this has happened in my life. And at the very end of it, I solidify it. I did forget to mention one thing that Treva, who organized this show, I had told her some time ago that I start these by making tic-tac-toe boards because the white paper intimidates me so much. It's just kind of my little thing. Every single painting has a tic-tac-toe board underneath it. Some of them, or a grid of some kind. It's all black on white paper, homage to my printmaking thing. And from that foundation, I get past the fear of the white paper. And that is the beginning of the layering process in what I do. So, but it is the story of my painting up to 2011. Something else could happen tomorrow.